Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. I hope that you're having a wonderful day. If you're new here, my name is Neve and it would mean the world to me if you would stick around. Today's video is going to be my December reading roundup, which is so exciting because after today that means I'll have done a full year of those, which is crazy to think that that is possible, but it is. And it's a super exciting milestone for me. So I'm so excited to share this video with you guys and I hope that you enjoy it. I'm not going to ramble anymore in the intro because I will never stop if I start. I'm just going to get straight into it. So the first book that I read this month was Ariadne by Jennifer Saint, which if you watched my November wrap-up video you will know was on this month's TBR. Unfortunately, but not surprisingly, that is where my sticking to my TBR ends. Which is often the case. I'm not great at sticking to my TBRs, but I did for this one and I'm so glad I did because I enjoyed this book so thoroughly. I really got into a bit of a Greek myth kick that still hasn't really worn off, to be honest, but this is the only book that I've read this month that is a Greek myth retelling. It's just that the ones I have read have been floating around my brain and I have bought some more in anticipation of reading a lot more of them in the new year, because I enjoyed this one and Circe so much. What I think really worked for me with this book, which is surprising because it was probably one of the aspects I was most apprehensive about, is that this spans Ariadne's pretty much her entire life, and such slow pace sounds like it wouldn't work for me, but I found it so fascinating and I thoroughly enjoyed being able to go on this adventure with her from start to finish, see all the facets of her life and all the different relationships that she's formed and lost and why. And I think being able to take a journey with her through such a span of time, you really get to know the character and the person that she is and her motivations and everything on such a deeper level. The same goes for her sister Phaedra, who is the other sort of main perspective that we get in this novel. We also follow pretty much the same span of her life, which was so fascinating, and I ended up being so much more devoted to her character than I thought I'd be in the beginning, because you're not set up with the expectation that you're going to follow her quite so closely. I just had such a good time reading this novel and I cannot recommend it enough. If you're looking for some newer published Greek myth retellings, I would highly recommend this one. I'm thinking that the copy of this book that I've got is the Waterstones exclusive edition. It has just come out in paperback, so if you're not a hardback fan, the paperback is now out for you. And they also do the hardback in this blue colour, and it's absolutely gorgeous. So get yourself a copy of this book and read it if you haven't already. I think that you'll absolutely love it. The next book that I read this month was Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney, which is her first novel, but the last of her novels that I've read. I've read the other two, and I was kind of on the fence about the other two, and I go back and forth between whether I enjoyed them or not, and the rating that I've given at the get-go has changed since I've given it, I think, for the other two. So this was my last attempt to make a concrete decision on whether or not I enjoy Sally Rooney's books. And it turned out that I actually enjoyed this one much more definitely than the other two. I had a good time reading this novel. I found the characters more likeable and more it was easier for me to invest myself in the characters in this novel than it was for me in some of her other books, particularly her newest one, which the more I think about, the more I think I maybe didn't like very much. The main character in this, Frances, was not likeable, that's a stretch, but I liked following her journey. I found watching her make an absolute mess of things more sympathetic and more entertaining than in previous novels, which is interesting because arguably she's probably the biggest arsehole out of the lot of them because she knows exactly what she's doing. Whereas I think in some cases the other characters in the other books don't. But I don't know if it's the self-awareness that made it more enjoyable. If I were to recommend a Sally Rooney novel to someone, I would definitely go with this one. I really think I could understand the praise that people give Sally Rooney for her writing style and her language a lot more in this one than the other two, because I found the characters more interesting and more likeable and easier to follow. So I really got to also spend time appreciating the rest of the aspects of the novel. I think I gave this one like a 3.54 stars. Definitely my favourite of her three, and Bobby, Francis's best friend, is a legend, apart from when she's being like a massive arsehole, but even that is sort of entertaining because she's the most logical of the characters. I think she seems most like the person we would like ourselves to be, which isn't always the case when you read a Sally Rooney novel. You don't always want to be the characters that you're reading about. So it was nice to see someone who was a bit more put together, I guess. It's not maybe the right word, but you get what I mean. The next novel that I read this month was Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, which I went into under the belief it was a Greek myth retelling because, you know, that looks like Pan to me, so I just assumed that I was going to be reading a Greek myth retelling. It's not a Greek myth retelling, so if you've been looking at this book thinking that that's what it is as well, it's not. That being said, wonderful book. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I was very apprehensive once I realised that I had been mistaken about the vibe of this book or the genre of this book, because I am not a fantasy reader. I tend to find the world building kind of exhausting. So I was worried once I found out that this was a fantasy novel that I was not going to enjoy it, but I did. And I think that it is a fantasy novel, but it's more like magical realism, which I find much easier to read because it requires a little bit less world building, which means the books don't have to be quite so big, because I struggle sometimes with large books. This book is, I will tell you before you get into it, a little bit confusing from the get-go, which is necessary and comes a lot from I think it's caused a lot by the fact that we've got an unreliable narrator who is as in the dark as we are about a lot of things, and following his perspective and his worldview makes no sense because it's so far separated from us. Like, the way he tracks time is different and the setting he's in is so different, and not a lot of it makes any sense, and you do spend the start of the book a little bit like, what the fuck am I reading? But as it progresses and things start to unravel and you start being able to figure things out and get an eye for what's going on and like sort of buy into the mystery of it and the developments that are happening, it's so good. It's so worth sticking past that initial confusion to get to the rest of it, because the rest of it is so good. Piranesi as a protagonist is fascinating because he's so confused, which should be really frustrating, but it's like the least interesting thing about him. He's so good. He's got such a like interesting moral compass, because really he's living in a place that has no law or set moral code. He only knows one other person, so he could be anything, but instead he's good and he's simple and he cares so much about other people, and he's just such a lovely protagonist to follow, and it makes you so sympathetic for what he ends up going through. And I'm really scared to say too much because you're best following the novel as it goes and knowing as little, I think, about the plot as possible. But I cannot recommend this book enough. I had such a good time reading it, and I really think that you will too, especially if you are a fantasy fan, because it is a little bit weird, but in a good way. So yeah. The final book that I read in December, and my favourite book that I read in December, was This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone. Read this book. Read this book. if you take any possible anything from this video, it is that you absolutely have to read this book. I haven't read you the description of any other book in this video, but I'm going to read you the blurb of this one because it has become my life mission to plug this book to people because it was incredible. Okay, you ready? Amongst the ashes of a dying world, an agent of the commandment finds a letter. It reads, "Burn before reading." Red and Blue, two rival agents hell-bent on securing the best possible future for their warring factions, strike up an unlikely correspondence. But what started as a taunt, a battlefield boast, grows into something more, something epic and romantic, something that could change the past and the future. The discovery of their bond will mean their deaths. There's still a war going on, and someone has to win that war. That's how wars work, right? This is a sapphic sci-fi novel that's sort of like a loosely Romeo and Juliet romance, tragedy, with time travel. Nothing about that doesn't sound insanely good, right? Right, because it is insanely good. Like, oh my god. And it's small, which I think works well because it's so mighty. I devoured this novel and I enjoyed every single word on every single page, particularly as the book progresses and Red and Blue's relationship develops and we get longer, more open letters between the two of them. Oh my god. Oh my god. The language in these letters, the way the authors managed to build such visceral, relatable, romantic and sexual tension between two characters who neither of which are quite human, who don't have a set time or place that ties them down to make them sort of like realistic or inherently relatable, but this bond that they have and the yearning and the wanting and the hunger and the love that they have for each other jumps straight off of the page into your chest. It is wonderful. I have recommended this to I finished this 3 days ago and I have recommended it to 3 people at work, multiple friends. I literally gave this book 5 stars before I'd even finished closing it over. It was fantastic and I owe my reading experience of this book to my co-workers because it's their favourite book and I went into it knowing that it would be good because I trust their opinion and they love the book enough that they've got a tattoo about it, so I went into it expecting to like it, but I was unprepared for how much I would love it, and it's in here and it won't leave, and I've already tried to look online to buy prints and stuff, and unfortunately there's not loads of it, but I'm looking, I'll find it because, you know, yeah, I think you've got the gist by now. But yeah, if you take anything from this video, it's that if you haven't read this book, you should do it immediately. Get it done in January, and I hope that you love it because I did. So those are all of the books that I read in December. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. I hope that you got a book recommendation from it. This is how you lose the time war. Let me know what you read this month. What book did you close 2021 out on? What was your favourite book of this month? What was your favourite book of this year? I am planning on doing one more video based on what I've read this year, which hopefully will be out either next week or the week after. That'll be sort of about my entire year of reading, and I'm really excited to share that with you guys. So if you would like to see that video and you aren't subscribed already, please feel free to do so. I hope that you all have a wonderful New Year's and I will see you soon. Bye!